Welcome. I am Leah Fleming, host of Morning Edition, heard on Georgia Public Broadcasting, and you are watching the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debates. This is the runoff debate for Republican candidates in Congressional District 9. In order to ensure everyone's safety during this pandemic, the candidates and the panelists are all participating from their homes. The Atlanta Press Club gives a special thank you to Georgia Public Broadcasting for helping organize these video debates. So let's meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Andrew Clyde. Andrew served in the U.S. Army. He later founded his own small firearms business. And Matt Gurtler. Matt is a member of the Georgia House of Representatives for District 8. He also builds homes. We are joined by our panelists who will question the candidates. And our panelists are Tia Mitchell, who is the Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Lee Shearer. Lee is a reporter with the Athens Herald. Now let's get started. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer their questions and 30 seconds to respond to rebuttals. I will hold up a piece of paper letting candidates know when they have 10 seconds remaining. For the full set of rules, you can visit the Atlanta Press Club website. It's atlantapressclub.org. So to start the debate, each panelist will ask a question to each candidate. Tia, you get the first question, and it goes to Matt Gurtler.
Hi, Matt. I wanted to start out the same way I started out with the Democrats, which is focusing on the pandemic. It's been months now, and of course, cases are now going back up after reopening. Do you think there should be another, stay-at-home order? What do you think should be done to address the rising number of cases?
Well, it's a good question. We had, there's three parts to this, I think. The economic crisis, of course, we have a health crisis, and certainly a constitutional crisis. I was glad to see that Governor Kemp did lift the stay-at-home shelter-in-place order. I think a lot of this has to come down to personal responsibility overall, but we have to recognize that this is serious as well and promote personal responsibility ultimately. I think when the proper role of government here is obviously to protect life, liberty, and property. In my time as a state representative, I was the only one to actually vote against the emergency powers in the whole state of Georgia, because it was an unlimited renewal. I think it was certainly reasonable, responsible to have a 30-day check, but I stood alone on that bill because it's really just Civics 101. If you look at it, the legislative body should be checking the executive as much as possible. And so as the most conservative member of the state house, I stood alone on that bill, and that's what we're running on here in this campaign, a proven conservative record. I've been named the most conservative legislator in Georgia for 4 years straight.
All right, Tia, you may now ask your next question to Andrew Clyde.
Hi, Ms. Clyde. Let's go along the same lines, but I want to ask you specifically, do you think that more health care officials should be leading the discussions on how the state responds to the pandemic, or do you think it should be, do you think state leaders are listening to healthcare officials appropriately during the pandemic?
Tia, I think that state leaders should be the ones, state representatives should be the ones making the decisions here. And should they listen to the health officials? Absolutely, I think they should. And they need to be educated to make good decisions. But, the people elected the representatives, and the senators and the governor. And so that legislative body and the executive, they should be the ones making the decision here in accordance with the Constitution. There's no pandemic exception in the Constitution. But I think that that definitely that our leadership should be making those decisions, and I applaud Governor Kemp for leading in that way. I think he is making the right decisions, and I fully support Governor Kemp in the decisions that he's made and continue to do so.
All right, Lee, you may now ask a question to Matt Gurtler.
I want to continue with the pandemic issue. We have four times as many hospitalizations in Georgia now as we did at the beginning of June. Cases are skyrocketing here. as in much of the country. And nobody much says things are under control. It's credible. So I want to ask you, is there anything you would do other than appealing to personal responsibility to bring the pandemic under control?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I'll just reiterate, I think a lot of problems that we see in our society and just in general can be solved with personal responsibility. But of course, as a representative of Georgia, or if I get elected to Congress, the ultimate goal is to protect life, liberty, and property and uphold the Constitution. Everybody swears an oath to it. Like I said, it comes down to, the Constitution doesn't get shredded because we have a pandemic. The health crisis is serious, and we should maintain our distance from people as well to be safe and secure. But we don't get to rewrite the Constitution because we do have a pandemic, and I will adamantly speak about that because I did vote against the emergency powers because I thought it was reasonable and responsible to have a 30-day check on the executive because that's what's in our Constitution. That's a separation of powers. And so if we really look at what's happening, the churches, the communities, the people, the individuals in our state and around the country really have to take that responsibility seriously. And if you feel sick or if you think that you have the virus, to really recognize that and be responsible with your decisions. I don't believe in mandating a mask.
Thank you, Matt.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Lee, you get the final question in this round, and it goes to Andrew Clyde.
Mr. Clyde, you fought the federal government's police powers with your lawsuit against the IRS. But now we have a lot more awareness in the country of other kinds of police abuse powers, police abuse. A lot of unnecessary deaths at the hands of police officers, which is increasingly evident that that's not just isolated incidents here. And now in Portland, we have federal government agents going around in unmarked vans, picking up people off the street. Do you see any abuses there? And if so, do you see any corrections we should be aiming for?
Well, I think any death is tragic, and that's certainly not what we want. But, I support people's desire to protest. I think that peaceful protest is correct. But when it comes to individuals that are going beyond that and are rioting or burning Wendy's or doing things like that, that's not correct. And our policemen need to be supported. They need to understand that we have their back. And I, as a congressman in the 9th District, I will have their back. And that's why I'm supported by 10 of the sheriffs of the district, and as well as numerous other first responders in the district have come out publicly and supported me. So I'm very much a law and order candidate, and I appreciate that. I have the back of the blue, and the back of the blue has me.
All right, that concludes our first round of this debate. The candidates will now take turns asking each other 2 questions. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask the question and 60 seconds to respond, and then 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Andrew, you get to ask the first question to Matt Gurtler.
All right, Representative Gurtler, you missed this vote, but I think voters would still like to know, do you believe HB 838, also known as the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights, was constitutional? And would you have voted yay or nay on this specific bill as it was written?
Yes, we answered this question in the last 2 debates. I said yes, that I would support any bill that upholds the Constitution and protects the life, liberty, and property. And I think it's very disingenuous to attack me on something that in Photoshop photos when I'm not even in the Capitol. I don't know where I see more fake news on your Facebook page or CNN.com at this point. And it's really just disingenuous. We had recess that day at noon. We came back in 3 hours later. I returned after talking to constituents in Franklin County. But yes, including this bill, it upholds the Constitution and protects life, liberty, and property. Of course, I support law enforcement 100%. I think it's wrong to paint me and smear me in a campaign to say I don't.
All right. Andrew, you may rebut.
Okay, so you are saying that this bill was constitutional as written then. Is that my understanding? Or are you just saying you would support any bill that you thought was constitutional? So
yes, we just
please
answered
answer
that question. Yes, I just did. Yes, I said it is, if it's constitutional and it protects life, liberty, and property, that it would be constitutional.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Matt, it is now your turn to ask a question to Andrew.
Yeah, thank you so much. I find it interesting that the whole campaign my candidate's running on is fighting the IRS and defeating them. Yet at the same time, he's taking over $3 million in government contracts, including from the IRS. You know, in the North Georgia mountains, we would call that hypocrisy at its finest. So I'd like my opponent to answer that. If you're fighting against the IRS, how can you say, quote, you want to dismantle them, yet you're taking tens of thousands of dollars from them right now?
I'm happy to answer that question. My company certainly does have a federal contract. It's called a General Services Administration contract, and it services all branches of the federal government, including every branch of the military. It includes the Secret Service. It includes the Bureau of Land Management. It includes the U.S. Marshals, and we cannot discriminate. Every branch of the service has the right, or every branch of government has the right to use that contract. The contract provides things like accessories, optics, and slings and parts to the government. It is competitively bid, so the government has chosen us as the best source. So if I were to discriminate against one agency or another agency, I wouldn't have the contract for very long. So this just goes to show that my opponent doesn't understand business, doesn't understand good business. So it's absolutely the right thing to do to serve every branch of the federal government.
All right, Matt, you may rebut.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear we understand what right and wrong is, and to say that you're against the IRS and also take money from them absolutely is hypocrisy at its finest. You can't be for small government and taking millions of dollars from government contracts, taxpayer money. It's hypocritical, and there's no way to get out of that whatsoever.
All right, Andrew, you may now ask your second question to Matt.
All right. Representative Gurtler, do you believe President Trump's decision to neutralize the terrorist Soleimani was an act of war? And do you believe it was unconstitutional?
I think Soleimani should be dead. Absolutely. He's a terrible human being. The reason I voted against the resolution that my opponent is trying to smear me with and saying that I do not support our president or troops, I support our president 100%. I support our troops 100%. So much so that we have to get back to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. But my opponent's running a smear campaign. As he knows, we had a personal conversation about this. We've debated this 5 times. But the reason I voted against the bill because it codified language with the United Nations. He claims to be against the United Nations, yet in the debate yesterday, he said he would have voted a yes to the bill that codifies language. So it's another hypocrisy on my opponent's part. Also praises the failed foreign policy of George W. Bush. This is something that President Trump agrees with me on, and bringing the troops home and having an America first foreign policy. That's what separates me and my opponent on foreign policy. I believe that we should bring the troops home. We should only go to war when it's constitutional, and we have got to bring our troops home and stop the nation building.
All right, Andrew, you may rebut.
Certainly. First off, this was a House resolution, not a House bill, so it codifies nothing. That just shows that my opponent doesn't understand the difference between codifying something, which is putting it into law, and a resolution, which is something of support. He did not answer the question whether he believed that this was an act of war by the president or whether it was unconstitutional or not.
All right, Matt, you get the final question in this round for Andrew.
Okay, why did you, if you say you're a conservative and you're painting me as not a conservative, which is ridiculous because I have the most conservative voting record in the state, why did you donate to the former Democratic caucus chairman that was on that leadership team with radical Stacey Abrams? You know, that's not conservative whatsoever. So I'd like you to answer that.
Absolutely. You know, this is a great opportunity to show how God changes people's lives. The person he's talking about is Doug McKillop. And Doug was a Democrat at one time, and he was a caucus chair, but he had a radical change in his life when he accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. And he changed from being a Democrat to being a Republican. And such a strong conservative he became that he authored the current pro-life legislation that Georgia has as settled law. So to call him a Democrat, I think is so disingenuous. You know, in fact, even in the Republican governor's race, Doug McKillop supported Governor Kemp, the current Republican candidate, as well as did I. So Doug McKillop is a Republican. He is not a Democrat, and I supported him as a Republican. So I think it's very disingenuous for my opponent to call my support of him as supporting a Democrat. That's just wrong, and that just shows how he doesn't understand.
All right, Matt, you may rebut.
Thank you. Still doesn't change the fact that you donated to the former Democratic caucus chairman that was in the leadership team with Stacey Abrams. And also, this individual they were referring to did donate thousands and thousands of dollars to John Burrow, which is a Democrat, and also donated to Stacey Evans, which is a Democrat, just in the last cycle. So to say that he's not a Democrat seems like is also disingenuous because he's still donating to Democrats. This is politics at its worst. People giving money out, trying to buy favors all the time. My opponent knows this. He's given tens of thousands of dollars to establishment Republicans, including Never Trumper Paul Ryan, which blocked the repeal of Obamacare and also stopping the defunding of Planned Parenthood.
All right, thank you, Matt. That concludes our second round. And for those that are just joining us, this is the runoff debate between the Republican candidates for Congressional District 9. We're going to now go back to the panelists to ask questions until we run out of time. As moderator, I may also ask a question. I'll determine also when a rebuttal is appropriate. Candidates may raise their hand if they feel that they should get a rebuttal. Lee, we're going to start with you. Lee Shearer, you get the first question in this round.
This is for primarily Mr. Gurtler. You've been cast as an opponent of various measures that would expand broadband in your area. In the area where you live, the federal government many years ago brought electricity to much of the Northeast District, the rural northern part. And now people say this is maybe just as necessary a thing with schools, with telemedicine,
Lee, your question?
Economic development. So what will you do to bring broadband to the 9th District?
It was kind of a complicated question, but I think I got it. Yes, I voted in favor of allowing EMCs to actually bring broadband into the district up here. You know, the things that I've been imposing at the state capitol are subsidies and interference in the free market. We've seen the federal government subsidize certain businesses, and they have terrible businesses, and it's not the proper role of government to pick winners and losers at all through taxpayers' money. A lot of the time I vote no at the Capitol. I'm commonly do oppose a lot of bills, but 60% of the time I'm agreeing with them. So I always say that because 40% of the time I vote no. But I'm voting no because there's things that add debt to Georgians. There's bills that interfere in the free markets. There's more regulation. There's more taxes. I've never voted for a tax increase in 4 years. That's why I've been named Georgia's most conservative legislator. That is right in line with our mountain values and principles up here in the mountains. This is the most conservative district in Georgia and the third most conservative district in the United States. And so if you want a proven conservative fighter in this race, that's me. I have the most conservative voting record, and I'll continue to uphold those values and principles that we hold dear in the mountains.
All right, Tia, you may now ask a question for the candidates.
Hi, Mr. Clyde. I wanted to talk to you. What message do you give to voters when they ask why should they send you to Congress and not your opponent when you don't have prior legislative experience and he does?
Well, I'm a 28-year Navy veteran with 3 combat tours in Iraq and Kuwait. I am a small business owner who has started a business from scratch. I now have 25 employees. So I think that business experience and my military experience, my combat experience has taught me many lessons in life that are very valuable in making good and wise decisions. And when you say I have no legislative experience, people don't really understand that. Actually, I do. I have been working with Congress for the last 6 years, actually from 2013 to 2019. And Congress passed a bill that they actually named after me. It's called the Clyde Hirsch-Sowers Respect Act. And that took away the authority of the IRS to confiscate legally earned money from individuals and from businesses, saving hundreds of businesses and individuals from wrongful prosecution each year. It took me a lot to work with legislators to get that bill passed, and President Trump signed it into law July 1st of 2019. So I think that's why.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. And I appreciate my opponent's advocacy. I was an advocate in politics for a long time. But my opponents never actually had to go through the meat grinder, the pressure cooker, as we call it, the Capitol. Never voted on a bill. You know, that experience is what sets our campaign apart. Actually having to make the hard stands. I'm the only Republican to vote against the corrupt budgets for 4 years in Georgia every time because they're at debt and subsidies. And that's what sets us apart. You know, that's an actual legislative experience, so you won't compromise. I've never compromised, and I never will.
All right. Lee, you may ask another question.
This is for both candidates. I would like to hear your what you would do if you got to design our country's immigration policy, and particularly addressing the young dreamers portion of that.
Can you repeat that?
If you were in charge of making our country's immigration policy, what would it be? And would you allow the dreamers to stay on that President Obama allowed to remain?
Okay, who do you want to go first?
Andrew, you go first.
Okay, all right, thank you. First off, I'm in favor of building the wall. I think that's very important. You can't have a secure country unless you have a secure border. So building a wall on the southern border is very important, and that would be part of my immigration policy. Now, when it comes to the Dreamers or DACA, you need to come here legally. That executive order by President Obama was not a constitutional order. Neither was it a proper authority of the executive. So I stand with President Trump in trying to rewrite that order, to modify that order. So that would be my take on immigration. Now, we're a country that of immigrants, and I fully support legal immigration, and I think people should come here legally, and I support that.
All right, Matt, will you answer?
Absolutely. So I support our president 100% on this, and building the wall 100%. We have to have secure borders to have a secure country, and I think that that's just common sense. And we should be. There's also two parts to this. You have got to get rid of the welfare state, and this was in place with politicians and bureaucrats putting this in. So you've got to change that as well and defund the sanctuary cities completely. We want immigrants in our country. Of course, we take in more, which is awesome. We have a great country, and we want to continue having immigrants come, but it has to be legally. I think that's the big key there, legally. When it comes to the Dreamers, of course, certainly it's a complex issue, but I don't think we should be blaming the children for the sins of the father and mother ultimately. Like I said, I agree with our president 100% for building the wall, defund sanctuary cities, and get rid of the welfare state. Those are three things we must do. If I'm elected to Congress, that's what I'll advocate for.
All right, thank you. That is all the time we have for questions. We are now going to allow each candidate to have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Matt Gurtler, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you so much for having me. We have just a little bit more to go until the August 11th runoff. I cannot do this without your support. We're running on a proven conservative voting record. I've been endorsed by Students for Trump. I've been endorsed by Rand Paul, the most conservative senator in the United States, and Congressman Thomas Massie, the most conservative congressman in the United States. That proven conservative record is what sets our campaign apart. We have the experience. We have the principle. I've been fighting the establishment for 4 years. I'll continue to fight the Republicans in D.C. and the Democrats as well to get our country back on order. We have to lead by example. I've done that. I'll continue to do that. I hope to earn your support on August 11th. So thank you so much.
All right, Andrew, you may now give your final statement.
Thank you to Georgia Public Broadcasting for hosting this debate. My name is Andrew Clyde. I'm a Christian. I'm a combat veteran and a gun store owner. I'm proud to have the endorsement of Congressman Jody Heiss, 10 local sheriffs in our district, 4 of my former opponents in the race, and dozens of local leaders in the 9th District. I have fought terrorists in the deserts of Iraq, defeated the corrupt IRS bureaucrats in the courtroom, and I will take on socialist Democrats and the establishment in Washington, D.C. So if you want a congressman who will defend the innocent unborn, who will protect our Second Amendment rights, and who has an A rating from the NRA, who will support our president and who will stand with law enforcement to keep our communities safe, then I humbly ask for your vote on August the 11th. I'm Andrew Clyde. Please go to Clyde for Congress, the number 4 Congress, to learn more about me. And I ask for your prayers. I ask for your vote. Please vote Andrew Clyde for Congress, Soli Deo Gloria. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, August 11th, and early voting begins on July 20th. We encourage you to visit the Georgia Secretary of State's website to find information on voting locations, as well as how to request an absentee ballot. Thank you to the candidates and the panelists for participating in this debate today. I'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's debate. And for more information on the full schedule and runoff of debates, you can visit theatlantapressclub.org. The debate will be available for viewers to watch on demand on Atlanta's Press Club Facebook page and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, which is gpb.org. I'm Leah Fleming. Thank you so much for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Have a great day.